spend with you. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy.
Well, this morning we started talking about, is the Bible still relevant? And the answer comes back a resounding yes, that it is relevant to all things that pertain to both life and to godliness. And we began talking about some of the modern issues. We talked about how it's applicable to dealing with racism, and that basically it comes down to there's no partiality with God, and we should follow his example. No partiality. Doesn't matter. People are people. And some people do people things. Well, quite honestly, all people do people things. I like dogs. I really do. But you know what? I know that dogs are going to do dog things. I accept it. When we deal with people, regardless, people are going to do people things. We got to accept it. We got to accept it. We talked about human rights. Piece of cake. I know how I want to be treated. So I know how I want to be treated. So I treat you in the same way. Easy. Really easy. So what's not relevant in regards to that? And we talked a little bit further. We talked about security and how the government has the obligation to protect us. It does. But we also have an obligation. 2 Thessalonians 3:10. We have a responsibility to provide for ourselves, to work, to labor, to be gainfully employed. And we know that that's talked about in the scriptures. Let's go to the book of Colossians, into the 3rd chapter, and just really pick up on how it all plays out. 3rd chapter, verse 22. He's already talked about children. He's talked about husbands and wives, although very briefly. Slaves, in all things, obey those who are your masters on earth. Some people come to this and say, well, okay, we don't have the slave master regimen anymore, so it's got to apply to employee. I think that's probably a pretty good analogy. I don't like when I go into a store or into a restaurant and the employee refers to me as boss. Okay, boss. I don't like that. I'm not their boss. I'm not their boss. I don't know what it means. I mean, I know what it means in employment particulars, but I don't know for street parlance what it's referring to. So what you look at, slaves, obey those who are your masters. Employees, you work for your employer. Do what they tell you. Boy, that's simple. I mean, it just kind of boils it right down. Do what you're told. You've been hired to do a job. Do it. Do it. But let's go on. And not with external service, as to those who merely please men, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. When you're working, people know you're a Christian, and you should work in such a way that you will not defame the good and glorious name of Christ. You work hard. You do what you're supposed to do. and you don't cause trouble. Having worked in the work world and worked as an employee, and then having worked as an employer, it's kind of dynamic. Now, did I own the business? No. But the owner of the business was here, and I was here. And so he would leave a lot. And he'd say, okay, business is yours. Several stores to run. Great. So I expected the employees to do exactly what I asked. And I had become a Christian during that time. And the people noticed a change in me. They said, you know, you're more understanding. You have a little bit more compassion to you. And I would explain to them why I've become a Christian. We represent Christ. And when the owner of the company came back after his travels, sat down with him and explained, here's what we did, here's why we did it. And he said, you've done well. Great, that's what I'm supposed to do. I don't need the accolades. But see, this addresses employment. It talks about labor and management. And it's so easy to see. But let's read on. Verse 25. For he who does wrong will receive the consequences of the wrong which he has done. And not without partiality. Yes, I had to fire people. I did. You don't do your work, you're gone. I'll give you 2 or 3 warnings, but you're gone. Did we have an HR department? No. I was the HR department. We let people go. I admire people that are in HR. They've got a lot to go through. I'm catering to Brittany right now, but they've got a lot to go through. But here it's all laid out. You don't do your job. You're giving a couple warnings. Who do you have to blame? Yourself. Yourself. We're not done. Chapter 4. Masters, grant to your slaves justice, fairness, knowing that you too have a master in heaven. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. After I became a Christian, I began to see these things. And I wasn't the taskmaster. And I never thought of myself as overbearing. But as one in charge, you have to step back. And you have to treat your people with equitability. So relevant? Yeah. I don't know how many pages of bylaws and procedures that Brittany has for her HR department. Do you realize how quickly all that's addressed? Relevant? Yeah. Wholly relevant. What about crime and punishment? That's addressed too. We talked about it a little bit this morning. Go back into Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes, we're going to go into the 8th chapter, and we're going to go down to verse 11. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed quickly, therefore the hearts of the sons of men among them are given to do evil. Swift justice. Swift. You do something wrong, you're arrested, you're brought to trial, you face the punishment. Easy. Right? Do we see that happening? No. But the relevance of the scriptures ring true. So crime and punishment is addressed as well as in that context as well. The punishment thereof, well, we know Peter writes about it, that we have civil government in order to met out punishment. And if you don't want to fear punishment from the law, don't break the law. Interesting concept. If you speed, you're going to get a ticket. You're going to have to pay the ticket. That's the punishment. Don't think it's fair? Don't speed. Simple. But let's look a little bit further. Cover the other issues. Our society is racked because of substance abuse. How many problems would be solved if only there was a handle to be able to put on substance abuse? Go back into the book of Ephesians, 5th chapter, verse 18. And do not get drunk. Simple. Don't get drunk. Don't over imbibe. I would caution that in order to prevent that, you don't start in the first place. But go over to Proverbs. You can see it on the overhead, the 23rd chapter. In Proverbs 23, drop down into verse 29. I like this passage, always have. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaining? Who has wounds without cause? Who has, is my acting bad? Okay. Who has redness of eyes? 30. Those who linger long over wine. Those who go to taste mixed wine. Do not look on wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly. And he goes on to say, a little bit further, at the last, it bites like a serpent, stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things. Your mind will utter perverse things. You'll be like one who lies down in the middle of the sea, or like one who lies down on the top of a mast. 35. They struck me, but I did not become ill. They beat me, but I did not know it. When will I wake? I will seek another drink. Been there, done that. Don't want to do it anymore. It is a miserable, sickening feeling. Think how many problems would be solved if there could be a handle put on it. It's relevant. It's powerful. I mean, homes that are broken, child abuse, vagrancy. And I know I talked about alcoholism, but broaden it out, drug abuse. I did a lot of counseling over the years in my practice. It broke my heart when families would come in and I would ask to see the children, teenage children. And I would ask to just talk to them. Parents would wait over in another part of the office. And I would talk to the children. And the stories that I heard broke my heart. Abuse. Total degrading of the child. Sexual, physical, mental. And in every instance, and I'm being forthright, I do not remember any instance being told me by a child when it was being abused that the parent was not under the influence. The dad was either drunk or high. The mother had too much wine, or mother's little helpers. And then the child was open season. So I would have to go back and confront the parents. The parents denied it. No, never abused our child. Child lying. Well, the child said this: substance abuse brought it on. And I was worried when I began to reveal that, because I didn't know if they went home and got more abuse. People, when they're under the influence, do terrible things. And they take advantage of their children. And my heart breaks for them each and every day. So if we could just get a handle on it. Oregon legalized pretty much everything. Recently they said, whoops. And now it's going back to the way it was. You want to talk about relevancy? Just a couple places we looked at, and the Bible's spot on it. Absolutely spot on. Moral standards? Changing standards? Oh, yeah. Standards are changing, but are the scriptures relevant? In 1 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, we're not going to go there right now, but in 1 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, what Paul does is Paul reminds them of the type of people that they were. And he lays it out so directly. Homosexuals, effeminate, et cetera, et cetera. And such were some of you. But you were washed. But you were changed. In the bulletin today is the article on metamorphosis. Talked about it in class. Talked about it in the sermon this morning. That's what we're talking about now. That the Bible is relevant because we can change whatever we're dealing with now. And that's what we need to be teaching. That's what needs to go out into society. That there is an answer for the ills that society is going through. Drive down the street. You see homelessness, degradation. There's an answer. You look at the wanton sexuality that permeates society. There's an answer. There's an answer. You may not like it because it's found in the scriptures, but there's an answer. So look what's found, 1 Thessalonians 4th chapter, verse 3. For this is the will of God, your sanctification. That is, you abstain from sexual immorality. That each of you know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor. Self-control. We know we can hold back from those things that we would like to do. Not in lustful passion, like the Gentiles who do not know God, and that no man transgress and defraud his brother in the matter, because the Lord is the avenger in all these things. Just as we also told you before and solemnly warned you. For God has not called us for the purpose of impurity, but in sanctification. Now notice he throws in there the idea of fraud. You don't defraud anyone. 1 Corinthians 6, is it not better to be wronged? Is it not better to be defrauded? So he's talking about moral standards. The Bible lays them out for us clearly. Mental health. I had a practice. And Linda said it was not a thriving practice because I never billed anyone. They would come to me and I would work with them, and Linda would say, when are you going to send out bills? And I said, well, we talked about it when they first came in. Well, do you think you'll get any money? Maybe. I'm a terrible businessman that way. But I had a practice, and people would come to me, probably because I didn't make them afraid. But we would talk about different things. And yes, I would tell them, here's my terms, here's how much I bill an hour, I don't charge insurance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they realized they needed mental health. And I practice what's called nouthetic counseling, still do, which is basically Bible-based counseling. I do have the classical psychology from school. I know it. I understand it. I may act like a buffoon sometimes. Barry goes, yeah, most of the time. But I do understand it. And I think sometimes by being and acting the fool, it tears down some of the walls and allows me to be approachable. But the answer for what people deal with is found in the scriptures. The struggles people have are found therein. Jesus said, come to me, all you are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Jesus is the wonderful counselor. It was talked about such back in the book of Isaiah. And we come to him, we can find rest for the souls. Paul talks about it as well over in Philippians, 4th chapter, verses 6 and 7. You can find the answer. And the answer is in the scriptures. Oh, you might need somebody to guide you. You might need to come to some realizations. But again, that's talked about. And when you go to a counselor, counselor's going to tell you and try to take you to the point of self-discovery. Try to get you to open up. What do the scriptures do? Scriptures challenge you. Look at yourself. Look at the person in the mirror. And what's the mirror? The Word of God. It challenges you to do that. So relevancy, yes. In my library, I have a couple books dealing with psychology. And it's called Prophets of Psychoheresy. And it examines traditional psychology. I don't agree with everything in those books, but it's kind of interesting to read because they are pointing toward the answers being found in the scriptures. And that's what we find. The answers are therein. So we could go a long time on this. I could immediately switch over in my brain to the dissertation on the parasitic paralysis of psychological seduction. And you go, huh? No, don't do it. Don't do it. And the eyes start watering. But the answers are so simple, so easy to find. And they're in the scriptures. And what we're talking about today, is the Bible relevant? Yes. And for the various reasons. And in the various examples. But it's extremely relevant when it comes to our relationships. And it was brought out the other day that the home is being attacked. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. we know that the original arrangement that was brought into effect by God for the home and family has been changed. It's been changed. It's been mutilated by those that would advocate same-sex marriages, advocate acceptance of the homosexual lifestyle, advocate the idea of mutilization of children and adolescents. Again, I've used my heart breaks 2 or 3 times in this lesson, but my heart aches, actually aches, for the people that have destroyed their lives and for the parents that have let their children destroy their lives. In 2002, I had a young woman who was a student in one of my classes. She came down to me after class, and after she asked if she could see me in my office. I told her where my office was. So a couple hours later, she met with me there. And what she was considering was transitioning to becoming a man. And I asked her why. Why? Have you talked it over with friends and family? No. Something that I want to do. Why? She did not have a valid reason. I begged her, I pleaded with her, don't do it. She went to Seattle, drove over there, came back. She had met with some doctors over there, came back and we talked again. And she said, I think I need to think about this. And I told her, yeah, you really do. You really do. Now, what the real problem was, she met a young man who she built a relationship with. And she wanted it to be something more. And the young man indicated to her that he was homosexual. So she thought if she became a man, that he would accept her or accept him or accept that person. It was the reasons why people are going through mutilations. It's ridiculous. But see, our society is beginning to accept all of this. And if we're told that if we stand opposed to it, that we're bigots, we're haters, we're any number of things. I put a little short out this week because people said, and these were religious people, we have to accept homosexuality because Jesus never said being a homosexual was wrong. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Christ, why would he need to say that? Throughout the Old Testament, it is written, and he comes along. He's the fulfillment of the law, yes. But they were under the old law at the time. And so I've gotten a little bit of feedback from it. Not as much as I thought. But something like 400 or 500, 600 people have watched it. And there's been some comments about it. Just didn't specifically say it was wrong, doesn't mean it's right. So we can't accept it. We can't accept it. But it's sin. And we want to put a premium on it because it is so abhorrent to us. But you know what? All sin should be abhorrent. The sin of abortion. the sanctioning of taking a life of a human child. It's talked about in the scriptures. Exodus 21st chapter, verses 22 through 25. It's talked about. So when you really sit back and think about relevancy, yeah, some of the hard issues we deal with, talked about in the scriptures. And as we're going through this, you realize I'm just going on the surface. Each one of these we could do several sermons on. I'm just trying to show you that the Bible is relevant. See, Solomon, right? God made man upright, but they have sought out many devices. And by those devices, we get ourselves caught in a spiritual mousetrap. And we trap ourselves. We need to seek the way. Not a way, but seek the way. And the way is Christ. We cannot hold to the traditions and thoughts of man. We can't. And so, bringing it to a conclusion, God's Word, the Bible, is the only thing relevant to our spiritual needs. It's it. Nothing else can satisfy. So over in the book of Titus, 2nd chapter, verse 11, you can see it right here. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men, instructing us to deny ungodliness, worldly desires, and to live sensibly, righteously, and godly in the present age. Relevant? Oh, yeah. But do a lot of people want to hear? Oh, no. They don't want to hear. And that's the real problem. People simply don't want to hear. Before I go any further, I better stop because my notes would take me another hour, 2 hours to finish. But hopefully, and you're all going, yeah, which is fine, because we just want to get the point across. People say the Bible's a dead letter, no longer relevant. The Word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword. And that's what we hold on to. And that's why we teach simply the Bible. Nothing more and nothing less. Well, the lesson is yours this afternoon, but as always, that doesn't want to go to B anymore. But as always, we like to end every time we gather with an invitation to any who has the need to put on Christ in the waters of baptism. Or if you need the prayers of the congregation for strength and or encouragement, however we can be of a spiritual assistance, we invite you to let your requests be known